increases in total case counts in Missouri. This is primarily driven by new cases in southwest Missouri, St. Louis, and Kansas City. 5 counties, Jackson, Jasper, McDonald, St. Louis County, and St. Louis City, make up approximately 60% of the new cases in Missouri this week. However, the growth rate of the new cases is decreasing across most of the state, including southwest Missouri. This is encouraging because southwest Missouri was one of the areas with the fastest new case growth over the past couple of weeks. Again, we talk about COVID-19 in Missouri. You cannot only look at the numbers of the new cases alone. You have to take into account the overall growth rate, the positive rate, the hospitalization, the ICU beds, and the ventilators. Since peaking at over 1,200 in early April, hospitalization in Missouri have decreased by approximately 50% and stabilized at roughly 600 in June. This aligns with what we're seeing with transmission rates. According to our most recent hospitalization model update, effective transmission rates have dropped or are stable in all regions except Kansas City, and we are still way under hospital capacity. So looking at the data as a whole, Missouri is still in a good place. We are comfortable with where we are at, and we continue to safely move forward with our recovery efforts. In addition to the 2021 budget on Tuesday, I have also signed 3 other bills this week. On Wednesday, I signed Senate Bill 591, a tort reform bill, and traveled to St. Peters and Springfield for ceremonial signings. Protecting Missouri's businesses and equipping them with the tools to succeed has always been a priority of this administration. By raising the standard of punitive damages, Senate Bill 591 will stop the unfair and unreasonable litigation our businesses face. This bill shows that Missouri is open for business and strikes a fair balance between Missouri employers and employees from senseless claims while still ensuring the ability of those harmed to seek relief in the court. Earlier today, I signed House Bill 2120 and 1768 and traveled to Tipton for a ceremonial signing. House Bill 2120 establishes provisions relating to utility infrastructure, including protection of safe drinking water in Missouri schools. House Bill 1786 extends the Missouri Broadband grant program, which is currently set to expire in 2021, an additional 6 years through 2027. Since I became governor, expanding broadband services, especially for Missouri's rural communities, has been a focus of my administration. The digital divide in rural Missouri limits growth in many sectors of our economy, including education, workforce development, healthcare, business retention and attractions, just to name a few. And now, with the challenges posed by COVID-19, access to high-speed broadband is more important than ever to our infrastructure and our economy. By extending the broadband grant program, House Bill 1786 builds on our efforts to bridge the digital gap and bring the best possible broadband services to all Missourians. Today, we are also excited to announce nearly $50 million to support broadband expansion across Missouri, including support for telehealth and education. Ensuring Missourians have access to telehealth and education is critical during these times. These are not optional services, and we want to do our best to increase productivity across the state. Today, Director Dixon is here to share more details about how this funding will be used. Director?
Thank you, Governor. Hi, I'm Rob Dixon. I'm the Director of the Missouri Department of Economic Development. And throughout this pandemic, as a state, we've been tested in so many different ways, and thankfully we're seeing signs that our economy is coming back. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, we've been able to celebrate several companies creating jobs all across Missouri. But even though we're seeing signs of recovery, we're not out of the woods yet. We can certainly learn from this experience and build our infrastructure in a way that makes our economy more resilient to shocks like this one. And today, broadband internet is the backbone of a resilient economy. Unfortunately, many Missourians lack access to high-speed internet, and that's why the governor has prioritized these investments. Some 300,000 households, 195,000 K-12 students, and 54,000 businesses and farms lack high-speed internet access. And today, action taken by Governor Parson will help thousands of Missourians go to school, go to work, and go to the doctor. Today, as the governor mentioned, we are announcing nearly $50 million for funding our state's digital infrastructure. This includes $5.25 million to support the expansion of telehealth services, $2.5 million in grants for libraries, $20 million for the expansion of broadband to unserved and underserved households with students, vulnerable populations, and individuals who've been encouraged by their employers to telework. Additionally, there will be an additional $20 million for K-12 and higher education institutions, which you will hear more about next week. On the telehealth side, by partnering with the Missouri Telehealth Network within the School of Medicine at the University of Missouri, we look forward to improving access to telehealth for those most susceptible to COVID-19. With the allocated $5.25 million, we can secure more than 12,000 hotspots that can be accessed by the state's 29 federally qualified health centers and 26 community mental health centers. On the library front, for some Missourians, the only internet access available to them is through their local library. And by making these institutions a critical vehicle to rapidly deploy these services will certainly improve their access. We'll be able to use the $2.5 million to purchase hotspots and Wi-Fi enabled devices to support telehealth and distance learning for the state's libraries in partnership with the Missouri Secretary of State and the Office of the State Librarian. In addition, as I mentioned, we're making $20 million available for broadband providers that rapidly expand broadband connections during the pandemic. These funds will be able to reimburse a portion of the expenses incurred as a result of connections made in those unserved and underserved areas since the pandemic began, and it will also directly address future needs. The funds will be accessible to all broadband providers and will be technology neutral as long as they construct broadband network capable of delivering a minimum of 25 megabits per second download and 3 upload. Finally, in addition to these efforts to respond to COVID-19, we're also planning for the future. And together with our partners at the Missouri Association of the Councils of Government, we've recently applied to the United States Economic Development Administration for technical assistance planning grant to help accelerate broadband in the areas of the state most impacted by the pandemic. Finally, I want to thank and recognize Tim Arbeiter, who's here with us today, the Director of the Office of Broadband Development for the state of Missouri within the Department of Economic Development, certainly for Tim's hard work and leadership, and he'll be here in a few moments to answer any questions that you may have. Finally, economic recovery and public health are two sides of the same coin. Today's action by the governor to direct these resources will certainly help expand broadband access in our state and will help us both on the public health and our economic recovery efforts. I would certainly encourage anyone who's interested in learning more to please visit our website at showmestrong.mo.gov/broadband to learn more. Thank you.
Rob, thank you very much. Thank you for what you're doing. Tim's kind of anxious to get up here in front of you. I could see that up here, so it'll be his first time up here. So let me just say, with everything going on, when we were talking the COVID-19 situation, even with the protests that dominated the news during the last 3 or 4 months, all along I want to thank Director Dixon and his team for the economic recovery plan that we put in place. the broadband, all the things that had to go on behind the scenes that most of us didn't know about, or most people didn't know about at the time, but how important that was for us to move forward, our state forward. And we talk about broadband, we know some weaknesses we had during this time, but I think the reality of why broadband is so important right now is what we've seen over the last several months. And those two keys are education and health care, to how we're going to provide those services across the state. So I thank Rob and his department for what he's doing. And Tim will be up here shortly. He'll be eager to answer your questions here on that. You know, let me just finish up by saying as we head into the 4th of July weekend, I want to again remind everyone to be safe, smart, and responsible. We want everyone to enjoy the holiday, but we cannot let our guard down. As you get outside and spend time with family and friends, please remember to be cautious, and social distancing is a priority. Holiday or no holiday, this is still the most important step we can take to keep Missouri on track, is social distancing. And if you can't social distance, wear a mask and take additional precautions. Use common sense, avoid large, congested crowds, continue to protect yourself, your families, and your neighbors. The 4th of July for this country, for this state, is a very special time for all of us. It's a time that we remember why we're all here today and the sacrifices that was made for all of us to be here today. No matter where you're at in the state of Missouri, no matter where you're here at the governor's office, whether you're in the media corps out there, the 4th of July is a time that we celebrate who we were and all the challenges this country and this state have went through over the years. Tough times and good times that we've went through. And each time, Missouri's answered the bell to do their part to get over these issues. This time is no different in our state. We've seen a lot of things happen over the last few months across this state. It's probably a good time for everybody to reflect on who they are as individuals, about our families, about our friends, and about what it's really like to help one another. That's really who we are as Americans. It's really who we are as Missourians. And if we all could come together and sit down and figure out solutions to problems, there is a way for us all to do better. And at this time, that challenge should be on all our minds. Too many times, we're not thankful for the things we do have, and we need to appreciate them more. And we need to quit worrying about all the things we don't have. And it's a special time of year to reflect on that and what it means for each one of us, no matter where you live in this state. Whether you're in rural Missouri, whether you're in urban Missouri, whether you live in a big city, whether you live in a poor neighborhood, rich neighborhood, or somewhere in between, we're all Missourians, and we should be here for each other, trying to make life better. And if there's one thing that we all should be doing, is making sure the next generations have the same opportunities we have and make it better. That's why we all need to take a little time and reflect over the 4th of July, what it really means, and the sacrifices made for other people, for all of us to be here today. So with that, Teresa and I want to wish everybody a safe and happy 4th of July. Thank you for being here, and God bless the great state of Missouri, and God bless the United States of America. Kelly?
All right, thank you, Governor. Director Dixon and Tim Allbutter. Kurt?
I don't know if this is on, yeah. On the broadband money, what's the source of that? Is that CARES Act money or general revenue? Or
Yeah, we're utilizing the state's allocation of the CARES Act funding. And of course, with the CARES Act, there are a wide variety of rules and regulations that we have to follow. And so all of these programs have been designed specifically to meet the CARES Act guidelines. We'll also be publishing additional information about the guidelines and the application process over the coming days, and you can find out some more on our website as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about timing in terms of, is this first an application period, then?
Yeah, do you want to take that, Tim?
Absolutely. Very good question. Actually, on the broadband provider program, the $20 million, the program guidelines and application will be posted later today, if not done so already. So that'll be available, as we speak, with a deadline of July 22nd for the provider component piece. The other second program that will be made available today is the libraries program. This is the $2.5 million allocation for the libraries. That program will go live today and has a deadline of July 31st for Missouri's libraries to apply for those grants for that technology and ability to access those for distance learning and telehealth strategies in their home communities.
Is there a certain spot in Missouri that you really need to start focusing for broadband? Obviously, students had to learn at home a lot these past few months, so is there a specific area? We obviously know you said rural Missouri, but is there any areas that you're specifically looking at?
When you look at the broadband coverage map for the whole state, there's actually pockets all over the state that reside in what's either called unserved or underserved. And so let me give a little bit of definition of that. By state of Missouri definition and the Federal Communications Commission, unserved are those residents or households not receiving 10 megabits down, 1 megabit up. So they're not receiving that. So that's kind of the lowest rung, if you will, or no internet at all. The second rung is called underserved, which is getting 10.1, but not quite 25.3. So 25 megabits down, 3 megabits up. These resources will mirror very similar to the current broadband grant program, where providers must meet a minimum of 25.3 or higher. Some providers are actually able to deploy at 50 megabits, 100 megabits symmetrical, and even providers are out there doing gigabit symmetrical internet.
Connor?
Hi. Commissioner of DESE said, just of course, there's the big disparity in the virtual divide between students. So will this $50 million, what's the timeline of getting this to these underserved populations?
Sure.
As we move forward, maybe thinking about the fall coming up with virtual learning?
You bet. I would defer to my colleagues at DESE and Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development. So I would say stay tuned for more details related to those programs next week. But yes, the intent for those two programs is to close that gap for those students that were really in that gap, that they couldn't experience online learning, whether that be all the way down into kindergarten level, all the way up to the senior in college. And so I would say stay tuned. More to come on that front.
Ryan?
Yes, Kelly, thanks. Question for you, Tim, and I have a question for Director Dixon. For you, Mr. Arbeiter, the telehealth angle, what can you share with us on that, about what that specifically will do?
Of course. As we ran some analysis and data, it was estimated just over 90,000 Missouri citizens could not access medical care during this time. It's a continued issue that, again, as we face with the pandemic, facilities closed down. So a lot of medical care or nursing care really was pushed to that distance or to the online presence. Many of our citizens do not have access to internet, and even some of our citizens don't have access to strong cellular networks. So they are literally in that internet desert, if you will. So this particular resource is leveraging an existing network called the Missouri Telehealth Network through the University of Missouri's School of Medicine. So leveraging that network that's already been in existence for years, working with the federally qualified healthcare clinics and the community mental health clinics to help stand up some technology and access to hotspots for those clinics to be able to check out to their clients, their clienteles. And these are levels of populations that are of high financial need or have very low connectivity.
Gotcha. And Director Dixon, a question for you, unrelated to broadband, but the governor at a recent briefing announced out here that 250 new jobs will be coming to a town close to Bolivar. He couldn't tell me anything more than that. Can you share anything new on that? Any details?
Sure. So, as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, despite the pandemic, despite the challenges, obviously, that our state and our economy is facing, we have seen positive news of companies, businesses making investments all across the state. The governor joined leaders from Accenture Federal Services last week in St. Louis, 1,400 jobs. We have other jobs that are planned to announce in the coming weeks as well. I say that because I feel confident that some of these businesses that have been looking at Missouri, have decided on Missouri, are still moving forward. I'm not going to get into the specific details, Brian, of that one because we're still in the final discussions with them. But the governor's right to be confident about that, and we do look forward to some more positive news coming from that part of the state soon. Thanks.
I will take one more for them. Philip?
On broadband, once these networks are in place in these areas that haven't had them before, is it easier in the future to then upgrade those networks as technology improves and it gets faster?
Of course, and I would say for those that are probably installing the maximum available now, technology is always changing, and so it's possible to go higher. But for those providers that are able to do the baseline of 25.3, many of them plan for the future in mind and plan for expansion, that they'll do this now. And again, they're the experts at designing their networks to be expandable in the future, because it only benefits them, the consumer, if you will, that they are able to expand those networks. We saw a high number of recipients in the broadband grant program were doing 100 megabit or higher. So majority of those recipients are really installing superior high-speed internet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you both. Dr. Williams?
Dr. Williams, I just have a question about the phases. Do you think that, sorry, that was echoing. Do you think that 2 phases was enough for Missouri? We see other states with 4 and 5 phases implemented, and now we only have 2 phases in Missouri, but number of cases are going up. Do you think that there might have been a better chance that if you had more phases that we wouldn't see an increase in cases?
Well, you bring up a good point. As you compare states, those are obviously arbitrary terms, phases. What we really looked at in Missouri is 3 areas. One was the acute phase, and as the governor just said, that was really represented by a peak in community transmission on April 7th. And then as we moved into May, we moved into a recovery phase. And so I think it was a very orderly, well thought out transition. And then subsequently in June, we've moved into opening up. So those really are the 3 phases that have made a tremendous sense, a tremendous example of what makes sense for Missouri. Now, when you talk about the cases going up, again, as the governor said, you can't just look at the actual number. You've got to look at the R0, which in Missouri remains around 1.2. Remembering at its peak, it was about 2.8 in Missouri. You've got to look at the positivity rate, which again in Missouri on a 7-day rolling average of new cases is about 4%, maybe 4.5. And we also, those things are variable because how many tests you do and how many people present. But one thing that you can hang your hat on a little bit is hospitalizations, because that really shouldn't fluctuate. That should be, although it's a lagging indicator, it ought to be a very good indicator of the burden of disease in your state. And I just looked at it before I came over here, and we look at it by region. And even in the St. Louis region, which was an outlier and it peaked up a little bit this week, when I look at 7-day trends around the state, it is reassuring for our hospitalizations, much less our ICU and ventilatory capacity, which are really at an all-time low. So I hope that helps.
And Dr. Williams, it's been about 3 months since there were those major outbreaks at some meat processing plants in the state. I was talking to someone from Montauk County just this morning, and they said that those outbreaks really helped kind of form their response system, and they said it's been going pretty well so far for them. So just kind of on a statewide level, how did those outbreaks help kind of format the state's ability to respond, and overall how do you feel that the state has been responding?
Yeah, thank you, because one of our commitments is, the governor says, always get better every day, especially in an emerging novel virus in which you should be learning something new every day. And I got the nicest note from Triumph up in Buchanan this week saying that they are really in a much better place than they were. And so that's been encouraging for our friends. I just got off the phone about 2 hours ago with Tyson down in McDonald County, that there is another side to this. And you talk about Saline and Montauk County. All of those were processes in which we learned very valuable things and really developed this boxed-in strategy that we have found very, very helpful. And just to give you an example of how effective that is, and it's just an incredible teamwork. We've done 43,000 tests, I think it's in the last 7 to 10 days, in just long-term care facilities alone. And one day we did 14,000 tests in one day in Missouri. So it's just incredible to me that when I think back to mid-April, that now we have the capacity to go into these 100 long-term care facilities that just have one patient and one staff member and do 43,000 tests in a week's time. It's a real testament to a lot of people working together very well. Thank you.
Two more, Philip and then Destiny.
Hey, Philip.
The increases in Kansas City and St. Louis, is that community transmission?
We believe so, yeah. We looked at that. When I look at the hospitalizations in Kansas City this morning, I felt that they're stable compared on a week rolling average. I looked at those. I think what you'll find there is they're concerned that younger people, that their R0 was 0.89 about 2 weeks ago, and now I think it's about 1.1, maybe, I don't think it's quite 1.2. And so thank you for the question, because as we reiterate going into July 4th weekend, that if you're a young person or anyone and you're going out, as the governor just said, it is so important to still use hand sanitizer, to social distance, and to wear a mask if you need to. If the situation presents itself, you need to wear a mask. So thank you.
Hi, I know that you already touched on some ways that people can have some personal responsibility, but are you worried at all about a repeat of the Lake of the Ozarks or anything like that this weekend?
I think it's something I am concerned about. I mean, it's warm weather. People have been sheltering many times. I think especially for young people in their 20s and 30s, it's real tempting to want to go out and socialize and congregate. I would greatly appreciate your help in getting out the message this weekend that a situation like we had at Lake of the Ozarks, where people are literally right next to each other even though they're outside, we really don't want to duplicate that. We don't want to lose ground. We've worked so hard to get to where we are. And so if you're going to be in that situation, wear a face mask. And better yet, social distance. Be 6 feet apart. Even in those situations. So I greatly appreciate your help as we enter into this weekend of helping get that message out. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Governor Carson.
Yeah, before it gets started, Brian, quit throwing me under the bus, would you? About them jobs down there close to my hometown. They keep asking me that. I think I got out in front of that a little bit. My director's back here saying, why'd you say that, on that? But anyhow, questions?
Hi, Governor. So the numbers of unemployment claims went up this week after they had been falling for the past 10 weeks. This is the first week they're up again. Do you think this is an anomaly, and what's driving it, and how are you reacting to it now?
I'm not for sure on that. I think we're seeing our job numbers here in the state are getting better. The economy's getting better with the numbers. Again, if you put all the numbers together to kind of look at, I'm not for sure why that is. I don't know whether that's in the system itself. But I know one thing, we're down about 100,000 where we were at our peak, so we're headed trending in the right direction. And I'm not sure what that movement was. Like I said, I don't know whether it was in the system. Again, there's a lot of things going on within the system itself on trying to make sure we get everything right and get the people in there. It's still overwhelming over there. We're still at 300,000 plus. But I think overall the economy is looking better every day. I think people are going back to work, and you see that when you're out there. Now that I'm getting out there a little bit, you're starting to see people get back out and get active.
So are you concerned at all that it may continue to go up, or are you thinking that this is just maybe?
No, I don't see it continue going up. I don't. I don't know what that particular issue is about, but I keep thinking every week more and more people are going to go back in, they're going to go back to work, more businesses are going to open up, and I think you're going to see people going back into somewhat, quote, a normal lifestyle, whatever that might look like in the future. But I think we're headed in the right direction. I really do here in the state of Missouri. I think when you look at unemployment numbers, when you look at things we're seeing, and the businesses are starting to get engaged, and I think just the business announcements we've had in the last week or two were Accenture up there, 1,400 new jobs, a wire company in Sedalia, some rumors about a company coming down close to Bolivar, Missouri, bringing in new jobs and everything. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I do.
Thank you, Brian.
Governor, good afternoon. Two quick questions, one about civil unrest and the other about the drinking water bill today. I had a few listeners say that they've seen some extra fencing going up near the Hazelwood City Hall today, near Florissant. Do you know if the National Guard is still up in North County? I know they were at least a few weeks ago in Florissant, so that's my first question. And two, the bill you signed today on the safe drinking water that's aimed at the lead in the water in the schools. How important is that bill, Governor? Thank you.
Yeah, let me just start off with the schools and the water. I think it's really important. I mean, getting clean water in today's times, what we've seen over time, really starting to focus on that. Water's just always essential to us. One is lifestyle, but everything we utilize has water involved in it. And especially when you get to schools, you want to make sure we get that right, that water quality is right. So I think passing that bill, making everybody draw a little attention to it and step up a little better to deliver that is a good thing. The Guard is available. We have the Guard available on standby if we should need the Guard for any incidents over the weekend. But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. And it doesn't matter whether you're at the Lake of the Ozarks in the swimming pool or you're in a crowd of protest. There's no difference in the two of how you're spreading the COVID-19. COVID-19 is out there. Whatever groups you're in, it's going to be there with you. So whatever we do this weekend, I guess it goes back to what I said earlier. I would hope everybody would just settle down a little bit. Let's get through this weekend, do the best we can for each other, and to keep this state safe. But if you get into a big crowd, no matter where you're at in the state, that risk is going to be there. And you've got to realize that risk is there when you go. And I know it's 4th of July. I know there'll be lots of family events. I know there'll be lots of public events. We'll be out there some myself. But I'm going to try to make sure that I do my part to do social distancing when I'm out there as governor of the state every day. We did that ever since day one.
Hi, Governor. As the economy improves, what's your approach to evaluating the withholds that you enacted this week? Will you kind of look month to month if revenues have improved enough to maybe put some money back into the system, or will you wait until a certain point later in the year to decide that?
Well, I think we'll wait till later in the year. On the withholds you're talking about, when will we start putting them back? I mean, as soon as we can. I will go back to where we began in this economy. I mean, it's kind of like the education situation that we're in, where the withholds were made on that. Before that time, we had spent, since I've been governor, we put more money into education than we ever have. We were looking at ways to give teachers raises, trying to figure out ways that we could change things in the state. All of those things can get back on track, but we got the economy going back. We got to get people back to work. And then the money, the withholds we have right now, we want to release that as soon as we can. That's why we worked with the education community in particular early on to say, hey, this is coming, so you need to prepare for it. And I'm just confident they did. I just think a lot of administrators that I talk to and I know about, DESE, the universities, as you well see how they're responding, they're just buckling down, doing the best job they can. I mean, everybody understands the situation we're in the state, but I want to release the money as soon as I can. So as soon as we can get that money back up, and I feel like we're comfortable enough we can do that, we'll put it right back out.
Thank you.
All right, then the last question.
Governor Parson, this has to do with St. Louis. Yesterday, Centene said that they were moving out to North Carolina, and they said that it had to do with good infrastructure and good education in Charlotte instead of bringing more jobs to Missouri in the St. Louis area. What is your response to that?
I think it's why we've been priority number 1 and 2, infrastructure and workforce development. That's why we got to do better at that in the states, why we've made it a priority under this administration. We have to continue to keep pounding that home. And if we're going to compete, and we're going to keep our companies here, and we're going to ask them to expand, we got to meet the goals of the workforce development, and we got to have the infrastructure in place. And you can't do one without the other. They both go together. And we got to figure it out. I haven't talked to Centene yet, but I guarantee you there will be a point that I would be trying to encourage them not to do that at all, because I think Missouri is the best place for a corporation to be right now compared to a lot of other states. And I think we given apples to apples, we'll beat most states in the United States. So, we just got to keep working on infrastructure and workforce development. And that's why I think when we're talking about broadband today, when we're talking about getting that funding back out to those education institutions, where we get to the training schools, community colleges. We was in Troy last week, and we're opening up a center there, partnering with a high school and Rankin College, teaming up with them. We still got to, with everything going on, you still have to focus on education, healthcare, workforce, and infrastructure. You have to do all of those things together, and we're going to continue to do that.
All right, thank you, Governor.
All right, thanks everybody. Everybody have a good 4th of July. Thanks everybody for being here today. Thank you.